Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd ask Mr. Longfellow if he could sing the national anthem for us. I'll please stand and face the flag.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras se porte l'épée, il se porte la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Joel. Appreciate your attendance here again this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
At this time, I'd entertain a motion to confirm our agenda for the special council meeting. It's a public hearing on a rezoning. That is the first thing on the agenda this evening. Then we'll move into the regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Bodner. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest, Madam Clerk?
No, there is none.
Thank you. Again, this is a public hearing under the Planning Act regarding an official plan amendment and application for a zoning bylaw amendment. The Planning and Development Department, Planning Division Report number 201897. Subject to the public meeting for official plan amendment D0901-18 and zoning bylaw amendment D1402-18. That's on the north side of Colborne Street West. Mr. Aquilina is not here. Are we? Evan, you're going to take the reins here. This is Evan Osh, our city planner.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. So this is a public meeting under the Planning Act. The purpose of the meeting is pursuant to, the purpose of this meeting, pursuant to sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act, is to consider an application submitted by Michael Lazier on behalf of the owner, Sam Armenti, for lands legally known as Part Lot 32, Concession 2, formerly in the Township of Humberstone, now in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, located on the north side of Colborne Street West between the roads known as Main Street West and 3rd Avenue. The application for official plan amendment proposes to add a special policy to the highway commercial designation in the official plan to support the use of warehousing. The application for zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning from HC, highway commercial, to HC-48, a special provision which will add warehousing as a permitted use. The warehousing use is being sought to allow the operation of a self-storage facility on this property. Notice of public meeting was administered in accordance with sections 22 and sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act, as amended in Section 3 of Ontario Regulation 543/06 and Section 5 of Ontario Regulation 545/06. The notice of public meeting was mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the property, and a notice was posted on the city's website on June 18th, 2018. A sign was posted on the property by June 19th, 2018. At this time, the following comments have been received from the public. Gary and Marianne Petrelli of 7 3rd Ave, Port Colborne. They are, in summary, they are opposed to the application. They have concerns related to traffic, noise, dust, and light originating from the property resulting from warehousing / mini storage use. And they are also concerned about the impact of development of the development on property values. We also have comment from Nancy Gillespie of 373 Colborne Street West, Port Colborne. Nancy is opposed to the application. She has concerns about noise, vandalism, items being stored, or exactly the nature of the items being stored, and lighting on the subject property. Nancy also has concerns about drainage impact from grading and construction on the existing drainage pipe and her septic system. And she closes by saying that mini storage is not compatible with residential uses. At this time, the following comments have been received from the commenting agencies, and we just have one so far. It's from the Niagara region, and they are stating that they are not opposed to the application. So an explanation of the procedure to be followed this evening. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Department of Planning and Development Report 2018-97, hear comments from the applicant, receive questions of clarification from council to the applicant or planning staff, and open the meeting to the public for comments and questions. Announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, and a brief explanation of future meetings regarding the application. So at this time, I'll start with the presentation of application for the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment. Just location and context of the property. So the property is located on the north side of Killaley Street West between Main Street West and 3rd Avenue. The property is currently vacant. To the north is an automotive parts retail / wholesale establishment. To the east is a legal non-conforming residential dwelling. To the south is a vacant residential land, part of the Rosemount Estates plan of subdivision. To the west is also a legal non-conforming residential dwelling, and to the northwest is a motel, and the property is the one highlighted in red on the above screen. City of Port Colborne official plan, that's a very rough approximation of where the property is. It's not to scale or correct shape either, but the property is, Schedule A, citywide land use to the City of Port Colborne official plan designates the property as highway commercial. The predominant uses for lands designated highway commercial shall include, but not be limited to, hotels and motels, automotive sales and service establishments, places of amusement or recreation, restaurants with takeout and or drive-through facilities, and accessory uses to the aforementioned uses, including a residence for a caretaker. And the current zoning, so this is from the city's new zoning bylaw, obviously, 6575/30/18. Schedule A7 to the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw zones the property highway commercial. The permitted uses for land zoned highway commercial include animal care establishment, brew pub, car wash, convenience store, daycare, drive-through facility, dwelling, accessory dwelling, food vehicle, hotel, motor vehicle repair garage, motor vehicle sales and rental service center, motor vehicle gas station, office, personal service business, place of assembly / banquet hall, place of worship, public use, recreation facility, restaurant, fast food, restaurant full service, restaurant takeout, retail building construction and supply, service commercial, and uses, structures, and buildings accessory thereto. So the purpose of the application is being made to add warehousing as a permitted use in both the official plan and the zoning bylaw to allow a self-storage type of establishment being built and operated on the property. Should the amendments be successful, a site plan agreement that will address, amongst other items, fencing and screening, lighting, parking, fire routes, and grading and drainage will be required before construction can commence. So now we move on to the next phase of the meeting, and so it's comments of the applicant. So at this time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to invite the applicant to comment.
Please ask him to come forward. Yes, come up.
Yeah.
There's a podium there with the red light on, so. And could we have your full name and address?
My name is Michael Lozier from 17 Endicott Terrace in Welland.
Thank you.
I'm acting as agent for the application. The purpose, again, is strictly to create a self-storage facility, and warehousing is the required zoning for that type of facility. It will be fenced in and secure. Currently, the building is designed in such a way that it's all interior storage. So the units will be located inside the building. We don't have any facility at this point for exterior storage at this point. So, and I guess I'll be here for any questions after.
Mrs. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the applicant, I would like to know if all these storage units are going to have their own outside entrance?
No, because of the spatial separation between the property lines, we're going to have to just create loading doors, and then they'll come into corridors and then load within the building itself. So there will be some loading doors on the outside, but not each individual unit.
Okay, and you've heard some of the comments from the neighbors that they're concerned about, which will happen at site plan, and I get that.
Yep.
But just so you're aware, I would be very strongly advising you that you have not just link fencing, because you want to keep that out. And with the lighting, I'm hoping that you're going to consider their comments regarding the lighting as well. When I read the bylaw in front of me, that this is in addition to what the bylaw says, in addition to the uses permitted under the highway commercial zone, this land may be used for warehousing and uses, buildings and structures accessory thereto. So I'm really emphasizing that, because I think I'm concerned about what you're going to store in there.
Okay.
Or what kind of things are going to be stored in there.
Okay, well,
Okay.
yeah, and at this point, the development is strictly personal self-storage.
Personal self-storage.
We're not looking at bringing tractors and storing stuff outside around the perimeter of the building. That is
Okay.
not the intent.
Perfect, thank
Yeah.
you. That's what I'd like to hear. All right, thank
And
you.
as for the stormwater management, yes, we'll have to go through the whole process.
Right.
Might have a retainage area,
Because
whatever
your
it
one
is.
neighbor's already had problems with drainage there, so I want to make sure that doesn't happen to her again.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Further questions from members of council? Go ahead, Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you. Through you to the applicant, or Evan. There's no building sited on this property yet, right?
Currently, it's a vacant lot, yes.
Right, but we don't even see anything proposed on here. And the reason I ask that is you said there's no outside storage planned at this time. So through you, are you planning outside storage?
No, we will have to conform to the requirements of the bylaw, and I'm not sure what the bylaw states at this point. Off the top of my head, I would have to refer back to the planner on that, but whatever the bylaw is required as outside storage or no outside storage, that's what we would adhere to.
Sure, then I'll go to Evan. Evan, can they store things outside?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Bodnar, Councillor Bodnar, through you, Mayor. The bylaw is not written, so at this point, if council does request it, they could instruct staff to prohibit exterior storage at this property.
Right, and not seeing how big the building is. I mean, if the building was a big size and there was no room for outside storage, that would kind of take care of it. But, and if we were to either request that or bring that up, do we do that tonight? Or that we would not like to see outside storage? I'm just kicking that around to see when that kicks in, when we do that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly that instruction could come tonight. I'll defer to Michael if he's amenable to that, or if there's any site limitations already.
The building that's going to be situated on the property is maximizing the required setbacks and the fire routes and all that. There really is not going to be room for any sort of outside storage. But on behalf of, as the agent, I'm sure if you required it to be no outside storage, I don't think my clients would have an issue with that. But we are maximizing the building to create, and we still have to create fire routes and keep traffic lanes, obviously, for the fire protection access, egress, and around the building.
Sure. Then, Mr. Mayor, through you to Evan. Evan, would that be put in the site plan control if we said no outside storage? Because if the building's going to be big enough, I wouldn't want to see a whole bunch of junk around there if this actually goes through, you know.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, the most definitive way to control or prohibit outside storage would be through the zoning bylaw amendment to include very specific language. It's already a site-specific bylaw, so we would just add a few extra words saying that exterior storage at the site is prohibited.
Sure, I would make that motion if council would support me on that. Mr. Mayor, can I do that now, or how would we do that?
I believe you can. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to see then, if you're okay with no outside storage, I'd like to see that written in somewhere so that it's carved in stone, basically.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
All right.
Seconded by Madam Demery. All those in favor? That's carried. So go ahead, Mr. Danch.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Lozier. So it's not a public storage area, it's just a private storage?
No, it's a self-storage facility for the public to come in, rent a unit, and store their items that they require.
Okay, so, and I'm just going back to what she said, so we're not gonna have a whole bunch of garage doors, bay doors on the outside?
No, there's going to be, the design we currently have is 3 loading areas within the building, 1 on each side and 1 on the rear. There will be no loading at the front either because we could potentially have some stormwater retention area at the front of the building kind of thing. So we're only going to have 3 loading doors on the building. And there will be some pedestrian doors for egress that could be used as loading as well. But there's not a whole row of doors on one side and a whole row of doors on the other.
So if it's gonna be a public storage, is it gonna be available 24/7, or is it gonna
No,
have?
at this time, no, it will not be. It will be regulated with gate access. And at this point, it looks like it's going to be about 8 in the morning, or 7 in the morning, I'm sorry, to about 8 at night. So dusk to dawn, give or take. That's the intention.
Okay, fine with that, thank you.
Anyone else on my right here? Mr. Butler.
So the hours of operation, through you to Evan. Evan, can we put that in the site plan control, or at some point, how would we deal with that? Because it could start that way and then migrate into midnight or whatever. So.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner, we will investigate, see if that's something that we can do under the site plan agreement.
Okay.
So that would be council's request that you would do that. Any other questions? Is there a limit on the number of units you are going to put into the main building?
Well, we're basically maximizing the usage of the land with the required setbacks for fire protection. So currently we're going to have 150 units, I believe, but we could go up to 163 units. But right now, based on the design, it's like 150 units. But the units can change because we can change the size within the building. So it's.
Items for storage, would there be restriction on items which are of a flammable nature?
It will be required based on the insurance policies that are in place. It's not a contractor's facility for, our mechanic shop. That will be regulated because the units are too small and they're not allowed to be used in personal self-storage because everybody's items will end up with that smell on them, right? So, I don't know what kind of regulations we could put in place for flammable storage. I'd have to look into that a little deeper.
Mr. Osh, could we have such restrictions on the agreement?
Mr. Mayor, we'll investigate that if it's something we can control through the zoning bylaw amendment or the site plan agreement.
Thank you. Is there any exterior parking on the property?
Only what is required.
Will that be paved?
Well, we're going to pave to the front of the building, and there are some spots in the front of the building, but they will be paved. From the corner of the building around, we are not paving during this development.
And your lighting, would that be directed away from the adjoining
Yes, so
property?
we will obviously adhere by the required bylaws for lumen emissions and all that across the property lines and all that, yes.
Mr. Ash, we can take care of that in an agreement.
Yeah, that is something that is covered by the site plan agreement.
Do you have any concerns, what we should look into as far as the site plan agreement goes? I'm talking to you.
Oh,
Mr. Ash.
for me, at this point, no, we're still at the early stages, just dealing with achieving permission to use the land for this use. So we haven't actually seen, we've seen a preliminary site plan, but we haven't actually seen any sort of definitive final site plan submission. So once we move to that stage of the approvals, should the applications be successful, then we'll start working with the applicant.
Any further questions of Mr. Losier? Mr. Bodnar?
Thank you. Through you to Evan. Evan, so when do we get a look at the site plan? Will it just be when it comes back for final approval, or what's the deal on that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, the right now site plan is delegated to Dan
Right.
for his approval. Council may choose, as they're doing tonight, to be the final approval authority for a site plan agreement. So we'd be requiring direction from council if council wanted to be the approval authority for the site plan agreement. But I would caution council to tonight not make any moves that might preclude an outcome of the applications before us.
Sure.
Okay. Any further questions once more of Mr. Losier? Thank you, Mr. Losier. There are no other questions.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, we look for questions or presentations by members of the public. Mrs. Gillespie, do you wish to come forward? Oh,
sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm obliged by law to read the following, that if a person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make written submission to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment are passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. And secondly, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to do so. And also like to advise members of the audience that I draw your attention to the back of the room, so the left table in the room behind us, that there's a sign-in sheet to request future notices regarding this application, including notice of decision. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ash. Mrs. Gillespie, could you come forward, please?
Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, I'm Nancy Gillespie and I reside at 373 Kalali Street West. And I'm here in opposition regarding the proposed zoning change from HC Highway to commercial to HC 48. I would like to have this documented for the record, and I submitted a brief outline to this office stating my concerns regarding the proposed self-storage units on July the 5th. I hope you've had a chance to look at look this over. These items are of importance regarding personal safety, water issues, and my septic system. In addition to this outline, on May the 8th, I received a call from Nikki Lumsden of Remac Realty regarding a request to purchase some of my property from the buyer. Ms. Lumsden stated that this lot had been rezoned and that it was approved. She also stated that I must have received a letter from the zoning department. At that time, I did not receive any letter, and this is in May, so I called the Planning and Rezoning Department. I left a message for Mr. Ock to call me about the zoning change. From May 2018 to July 9th, 2018, I have never received a response from him. On June the 21st, 2018, I received a notice regarding this meeting, so I'm here asking you to turn this rezoning down. When I wrote this up, I did not realize what was proposed for this storage center. I thought it was going to be individual, freestanding, and so this changes a little bit of what I have to say in regards to that. But I just want to say that I have called around to different storage units, and they have advised me, I was told it was just going to be storing furniture. Now, I had called around and they said no, once they rent these units out, that people are given the lock and key and they're allowed to come and go as they please and store whatever they want. And I know just from speaking to people that they do store paint, paint thinners, all kinds of, little household chemicals, along with their furniture and their personal effects. So I am concerned about that. And also the lighting, which my bedroom light actually sits on the west side. So these lights, however they're going to be adjusted, I don't know, but I'm hoping it's not going to be shining in my bedroom windows. Pardon me. So I just want to say, in regards to all that, that I don't know, like these I don't want to say that I'm against anything going forward in our city, because our city's a lovely city. But I can't fathom the thought of putting a storage unit in between two residential dwellings. It just, to me, it's just not, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right. Like you're driving along and you see a house and then you see a bunch, then you see this thing and then another house. Behind me, yes, on the Main Street side, there's, the hotels and what have you, the Napa Auto, and they're great. I mean, they're great neighbors. But I just can't see this for the life of me going in between our two residential dwellings. I just can't. So, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, please do the right thing and turn down this proposal. I thank you.
Just a minute, Mr. Gillespie. Mrs. Gillespie, just hold on for 2 seconds.
Certainly.
Unless there's some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Questions of the council? To my right, are there any questions of Mrs. Gillespie? And to my left. Yes, Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Evan. If this does go through, you stated in the site plan that lighting would be controlled to shine into the proposed new development rather than out. Are you confident that that could be controlled?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, the Planning Act does allow municipalities to control certain elements through the site plan agreement, and one of those is lighting. Certainly, we do not allow lighting to project from one building over the lot line to another. That being said, certain ambient light will shine in, well, every direction. It is ambient light. So that is maybe a little more difficult to control, but we will work with the applicant to ensure that it's certainly minimalized.
Sure. And one more, Mr. Mayor. From Ms. Gillespie, at least she's saying there's significant water problems on that lot as far as drainage.
That's correct.
Evan, are you sure that if this goes through that can be controlled? And because I did some work on that area when I was mayor with some of the neighbors on the other side, and it is a low area.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly by law, water cannot drain from one property to another unless there's some sort of common law drainage rights. In this case, as with all new commercial and industrial developments, all waters, storm or water generated on site must be contained on site, either through storm sewers or stormwater management pond, stormwater retention pond. So I realize the grading is high. Right now I haven't actually gone out there and looked at the grading per se, but if that is something that we would control through the site plan agreement to ensure that there is no runoff from this property to neighboring properties.
Sure, and just to pick up on Ms. Gillespie's request or consideration for council to maybe put a house there instead of a commercial building. The zoning on that lot, what would have to happen if someone wanted to put a house there instead of, it'd be the same situation we're in now to get a zoning change to do that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, in the official plan that was approved by council and then approved by the OMB in December of 2013, rezoned this block, essentially the houses, from the houses on the back, the rear lot lines for the houses that front onto the western side of 3rd Ave, through to, well, Main Street West and Clally Street West, that triangle. All of those properties were redesignated highway commercial in the official plan. I think previously Mrs. Gillespie's property, the applicant's property, and the other property to the west were residential development. So in 2013, all of the designations changed to all highway commercial, and then with our new zoning bylaw that was approved by council in April and came into effect in mid-May, all of these properties, the zoning was changed from residential development to highway commercial to reflect the change in the official plan designation, which is a long way to say that if residential development was being favored here, it would require both an official plan amendment and then a subsequent zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, I think that's important for people to hear just so they know what we're up against. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to either Evan or Mrs. Gillespie. One of the things that you said was that with the residents on either side of this thing, that it doesn't fit. And so to Evan, is there a way in terms of facade or to make a building like that fit in better so it doesn't kind of stick out like a sore thumb? Would there be methods in which to, if this was to go through, that it would make it less obvious that it's a commercial building, I guess, and to fit in better with the neighboring properties?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters. So the property fronts onto Clally Street West, which is a regional road. The region will require an urban design standards review of the proposal. I don't know if that is pertaining to facades or if it's just exclusively pertaining to landscaping around the property, but we will certainly be looking for plantings along the front through the site plan agreement to kind of soften the image of the property. We can investigate opportunities with the applicant to have facade that is certainly not industrial looking, perhaps a little more less highway commercial looking as well, something a little more neighborhood commercial. Exactly, something that is more in keeping with the rural-esque location that it's going into right now.
Thanks for the answer.
Finish, Mr. Butters.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on my right? Mrs. Gillespie, do you have a septic system, or do you have a...
I have a septic system, yes.
Okay.
I have city water and a septic system. And the septic system, as I outlined, it sits at the back of my property to the north, and the property line runs along with Napa Auto. Now, they put a drainage pipe in there to allow for the water to drain out, because Napa Auto, previously Young's Auto, had a French drain that, percolated, the water ran off, supposedly, and ran off the excess water there. Now, on the other side, Mr. Armente's property, when it rains, my field, my empty half acre, looks like a little rice paddy. And my big concern is that right now, if you go up Clally West and you look, my culvert sits lower than the culvert for this empty property. And everything is up so much higher, and I have this fear of it becoming even worse than it is now. And I don't want them to dig up and disturb what functions quite well for my septic system at this time. So, I don't know, it just sits wrong with me that I deal with this anyway, I've put up with it, and I just say, okay, you know, I'm okay with this right now. This, on the other hand, I don't know. It just seems that it's like a big horse being thrown in the midst of everything else, and it's just sitting there waiting for something to happen. I believe that.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that it doesn't.
You mentioned Mr. Armenti. Is Mr.
Yes.
Armenti an adjoining owner to the west?
Yes, he owns that property.
Between yourself and Mr. Armstrong?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So it's just, anyway, I just wanted to voice my opinion, and I hope things go, if they don't go my way, I'm hoping that this will do right by me and Mr. Armstrong's family.
Oh, we have another question from Mrs. Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nancy and I have talked several times about this.
Yes.
And I helped her when she was first trying to get that drain in her back to
Correct.
alleviate the water that was draining. And I share her concerns very much. And I know this is just the planning act, and it still has to come back to council for approval.
Okay.
But all your things that you are mentioning, the drainage, the lighting, all those things have to be addressed in site plan, because there's many councillors right now sitting have those same concerns for you. First of all, we're voting on a building, we don't even know the size of it yet.
Correct.
We don't know. We're just, okay, well, this is going to be commercial, you know, so.
Yeah.
All those things I want to assure you will be addressed at site plan. You'll certainly be able to come to that council meeting and make sure that we listen to all those things and take care of them for you.
Great.
Because I think it's very important that you're heard and you're the one affected the most, and I think it's very important that your concerns are taken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A question for Mr. Osh. What are the side yard setbacks for this property being rezoned? What I'm looking for is the distance between Mrs. Gillespie's house and the building on the adjoining lands to the west.
Right. I apologize, I don't have that information with me right now.
You can provide it then.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Mr. Lazier spoke a little bit, the proposal right now is for a building in the center of the property, surrounded with fire lane. So there will certainly be enough of a setback between the side of the building and the lot line for a proper fire lane and turning radius at the corner for fire apparatus. I will get you the actual numbers for the next meeting. You
referenced plantings along the front of the property of the development to soften the image. Can we look at plantings along the sides of the property as well?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. That is something we can look at doing. Certainly, there will be fencing, but we can see if there's opportunity as well for screening through trees or hedges.
And what is the zoning of the property across the road on Kalali, on the other side of Kalali?
The zoning across the road it's a mixture of residential zones pertaining to the Rosemount Estates subdivision. So it is residential. There's a special designation for it. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it is residential, and I believe it is.
I think it's R3.
Yes, it's a higher density residential.
Yeah. For townhouses, I believe it's stated, yeah.
Exactly, and sorry if I can just go back.
Sorry, sure.
No, where are we here? So if I can just point out that this area right here is part of the old Highway 3 diversion lands through the middle of Port Colborne, and that does not have zoning applied to it right now. So you're at a very thin edge of R3 zoning across the street.
And the old zoning was lands to deal with the tunnel under the canal, which has now been abandoned by the
Correct.
MPC, whatever it's called now. Okay. Did I see another hand up over here?
How lovely that would look, eh? If there was townhouses across the street, nice residential areas, and there's that storage thing looking at everybody.
But that's
How nice.
something we take into consideration, Mr.
Thank
Ross.
you so much. I appreciate that.
Mr. Josh,
Any other questions for me? No?
do we take into consideration potential development across the road?
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Okay. No other questions arising out of my questions? Thank you, Mrs. Gillespie.
Thank you, Mayor.
It was indicated that there was another individual that expressed concerns. Petrelli, or are they here? Do they wish to speak? Or anyone in the audience has a concern, this is the time that you have an opportunity to come to the mic and express that concern. So there are no further questions this evening on this application. Josh?
Thank you, Mr.
I have one question. Mrs. Gillespie, you provided us with a written submission. I think all of council received that. We can file this with the clerk as part of your submission because you didn't quite follow what was set out here. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Ash, you may continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And even though the Peter Ellies are not in attendance tonight, their written submission will be treated with equal weight. So, announcement of respecting written notice of passage of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk a written request for notice of adoption and passing of a zoning bylaw and official plan amendment will be given notice. In the sign-in sheet at the in the committee room 3 is will substitute for written request to the clerk. So this concludes the public hearing under the Planning Act. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment will be placed on council's agenda at a future meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ash. That would appear to conclude the consideration. At this time, I entertain a motion for adjournment of this specific special council meeting. Moved by Mr. Bodnar, seconded by Mr. Bench. All those in favor? Can I see those hands again, gentlemen? Opposed? There being none, is carried. This concludes the regular meeting of the committee of the whole. I'd like to move on to the regular meeting of the committee of the whole, 15-18, today, Monday, July 9th, and are there any addendum or delegation items, Clerk?
No, there are no addendum items tonight.
I'd entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 1 on the agenda, as it deals with selling property, Empire Road and Micro Road allowance to Sun Communities. I haven't participated in this since it started, as Sun Communities has...
You have a business operation
Yeah, it has,
on
I have a
that property.
business in there, and they're my landlords, so I
Right.
haven't participated at all in any of that, and I won't this evening either.
That's fine, thank you. Any other? Mrs. Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to declare indirect pecuniary interest for item number 11 because I'm a member of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56, and that item is a request from the Legion.
Thank you. Any other? And move on to determination of items requiring separate discussion. Now, first of all, I guess we better adopt the minutes. That's the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 14-18 held on June 25th of this year. Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now move on to approval of items not requiring separate discussion. Councillor Kenny, there's approval of items requiring separate discussion.
Yes, and I will add 11 for the councillors, complex.
1 and 11?
No, 11.
Just 11?
Yeah. 1 and 11, and I'll, number
Okay,
1 and
1
number
and
11 for the councillors.
Okay.
I'll just pull them for that reason, sir. Thanks.
Councillor Desmarais, do you have a,
I do, Mr. Mayor. Item 6, please.
Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I may want to speak to item number 1, and I would like to lift item number 2 and item number 9, please.
2 and 9?
Yes, please.
Any further on my right? Being on my left? None? Okay. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve those items, not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Bodnar, seconded by Councillor Danch. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. There are no presentations this evening, you know? There is a, like, I'll let you know we have that. Is it Margaret Josephovic in the audience tonight? Margaret, could you come forward? Margaret is a project expediter from the City of St. Catharines regarding Housing Action Plan 2017. Welcome and thank you for coming. We have approximately 10 minutes for your
Okay.
presentation.
I know you guys are busy. Use a clicker? Okay, thank you very much for having me. So I'm a project expediter. I sit between the planning department and economic development. I was a planner at the City of St. Catharines, so I've worked on our housing action plan as well as our draft rental housing licensing bylaw. So to give you a bit of background, last January, Council instructed staff to go out and do as much research as possible to try to see every tool and action item that's available to the municipality to be able to encourage the development of affordable housing. So everything that the municipality has in their jurisdiction and their role to be able to help try to alleviate this issue. So the first thing we looked at is what is affordable housing, to be able to understand it. As per the provincial policy statements, that's your basis provincial policy as far as planning goes. For ownership, it's the least expensive of 30% of annual income going toward accommodation for low and moderate incomes, or a purchase price that's 10% below the average in the regional area. And similarly for rentals, it's 30% of annual income going toward accommodation, or a rental price below the average. So you have to understand also that this is the definition, but it may not be the exact appropriate definition for your city. So when you are addressing affordable housing, there may be purchase prices and rental prices that are higher than this, that if you help with those unit developments, it still may help with the issue at large. The next important thing to think about is the government roles from federal, provincial, regional, and municipal. So Port Colborne, like St. Catharines, is part of a two-tier municipal structure. So it is not the role of the lower tier for social service provision, shelter services, or to establish a housing provider such as Niagara Regional Housing. It is the role of the lower tier to advocate for funding and for tools and to implement the policy tools and planning tools that are available to the municipality. So the first thing we did was we met with all the stakeholders that are involved. So we met with developers, met with tenants and landlords, service providers, everyone really in the area that is touched with affordable housing. And some of the issues that they identified were the lack of units and the poor condition of the units, the NRH wait list, the unit configuration. So it was difficult when you needed a bachelor apartment versus a four-bedroom apartment, and that definitely affected how long you would wait for a unit. Increasing market prices, public opinion, so that when there were developments that were coming along, there was so much pushback from the public that it became a much longer and more complicated process, and it sort of turned developers away from wanting to do that at all. The cost of development, availability of funding and access to funding, landlord and tenant issues, long-term affordability being difficult to ensure, so that as a city, if you wanted to provide any type of incentive, how do you ensure that after you give any type of grant, that the development stays affordable for any long-term period? And that innovative options were restricted by regulations and strict building codes. So the current practices at the City of St. Catharines, we have official plan policies and zoning bylaw regulations that do encourage infill and intensification and a wide variety of housing options and tenure. And we're very open to collaboration with regional municipalities, such as myself presenting tonight, sharing information. So what we did was we looked at tools and action items that we divided into the categories that are listed on this slide. So I'll go through a few examples in each category so you guys can get a bit of an idea of what you can be implementing. So we started off with advocacy, so petitions to the province for funding and for land to be used for affordable housing, creation of a municipal service corporation to levy funding, policy creation that all surplus municipal lands are first considered for an affordable housing project before any other use, support for public transit, which is a big topic in this region. Zoning bylaw amendments, so parking exemption areas. Currently our downtown is a parking exemption area, but parking is one of the biggest costs of a development, so being able to remove that could maybe facilitate some developments to become a little bit more feasible. Prohibition of density downsizing, so not allowing a property to go from a higher density to a lower density. Encouraging built-in accessory apartments and increasing the size allowances. So currently we allow for interior accessory apartments in all residential dwellings. We have received some comments that to make it an accessible suite, so with wider washrooms, wider hallways, our size restrictions make that a little bit tricky. So we're looking at that. Next, official plan amendments, amending our condominium conversion policies to protect our rental housing stock. We have a very low vacancy rate as is. Waiving of parkland dedication for affordable housing projects. Demolition control areas to be able to consider where you will allow rentals to be demolished in the city. Strengthening of affordable housing policies in the official plan, which then allows you to make decisions on zoning bylaw amendments, minor variances, consents that support affordable housing. And taking a look at inclusionary zoning. Processing and staff, having an automatic waiving of fees that provides more certainty at the pre-con level so that when a development is going forward for financing or anything like that, they know exactly what they're getting through the development process. Extending site plan approval dates for projects because we have deadlines and site plan agreements. Hiring a staff member that specializes in affordable housing, and continued consultation with the development community to ensure that as the market changes, as development demands change, we're adjusting our process to see what they need to get involved. Community improvement plan amendments, so adding value-added criteria for affordable housing. Currently, our tax increment grants are evaluated and ranked in order of, you have assessment, size, priority areas, LEED certification, accessibility. So adding affordable housing in there so that a property that comes forward for grant funding, if they have affordable housing as part of it, they rank higher on council's list. Adding a sunset clause to our current approvals. We have several approvals that are about 7 to 10 years old that haven't moved forward, and there's already allocated funding in our budget that's just sitting there. So that allows us to fund some affordable housing projects without adding extra money into the budget. And then creation of a standalone CIP grant, affordable housing CIP grant. Next is incentives, so comprehensive grant information. One of the bigger things that we heard was that there is a lot of funding out there from the province and from different agencies, but that it's very difficult to access and to know when the timelines are, that the deadlines are very tight and you have to have certain information at certain times, and that a lot of developers just miss out on the opportunity. So having a staff member to help out with that, to be able to secure some of that funding. Tax rate changes for condominiums and apartments. A lot of the condo conversions that we do see are purely for tax reasons, but it does still take away rental stock. And implementing density bonusing. Collaboration and information sharing. So creation of property profiles and examples of successful projects. So there are plenty of very well done affordable housing projects in the region, and it'd be great if people knew about them. Public education campaigns, so that somebody knows exactly what affordable housing is, what it looks like in your community, what it means for your community. Information sharing across the region and through professional associations. And innovation, so staff support of innovative housing options. So looking at mini homes, container housing, modular housing, flex housing, even 3D printing, and cooperative student housing. So having, when somebody does come in with a development of this sort, that our staff has the time to sit down and see, okay, how does this fit in with building code regulations, zoning bylaws, and official plans? And then partnering with Ontario universities to develop design competitions to come up with ideas. It's a wealth of knowledge that's really at our disposal. And I can take any questions now.
Thank you, Margaret. Questions of the presenter? Start with Mrs. Butter, then Mrs. Kenny, then Mrs. Demary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter, thank you very much for the information. Can you speak a little bit more about the creation of CIP affordable housing grants?
Sure. So what we had looked at, we're looking at a bit of a preliminary basis. It would function a little bit like residential grants. So it wouldn't be a tax grant because a lot of the affordable housing projects qualify under a structure where they're not going to be paying taxes after. So giving them a chunk of their taxes back doesn't work. So what we've done in the past in the downtown, you get a certain amount of money for every unit created up to a maximum. Before in our old community improvement plan, it was, I believe, up to $125,000 for so many units created in the downtown. So it would be something similar for affordable housing units. And there would have to be some sort of agreement on title that would ensure that, in accordance with the provincial policy statements, the definition of affordability, that the units would remain affordable for 20 years. 20 years is generally the accepted practice.
Okay, and one follow-up question. Can you talk a little bit about inclusionary zoning? What does that mean?
So inclusionary zoning is something that has come out recently. The regulations from the province came out, I believe, in the spring. And it allows a municipality to stipulate that a certain percentage of all units created have to be affordable. So you can say that, okay, every time you build an apartment building, 10% of the units in the apartment building have to be affordable units.
Okay.
There are regulations that go with that require some contribution from the municipality, so it's not as easy a process.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You talked a lot when you were in your, about housing in the downtown core. So is that because there are a lot of businesses leaving that downtown area? So they used to be businesses, now they're vacant buildings. So you're taking advantage of those vacant buildings and creating housing?
There is some of that happening. We do have a vacant space grant where if you convert vacant spaces into residential, you do get a grant. More of the concentration toward the downtown is because it's close to jobs, it's close to services, it's close to transit. So that's where a lot of the affordable housing projects like to locate. And a lot of the funding they can receive from the province or CMHC likes to stipulate that you have to be near an urban core. So.
Okay, and then, sorry, just one more question. This sunset clause for the inactive current approvals. So, are I guess I said, are there approvals made for a housing project and they're just not going forward?
Yes, so
Okay.
we've had our community improvement plan, I believe, began in 2004. So we have several approvals from the earlier days of that program that haven't moved forward, but we allocated funding to it 10 years ago. So that funding is just sitting in a budget waiting for that project to go ahead because we don't have a sunset clause in our community improvement
So you
plan.
should always have that.
You should always have a sunset clause.
Okay. All righty, thank you.
Mrs. Demry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Margaret, thank you so very much for coming tonight and sharing all of this with us. And it's, I know that we've had the presentation at the Social Determinants of Health Committee in the past on this, and it was very good that council gets to hear it all and staff is exposed to it. I would hope that our staff would take the work that's been done by the City of St. Catharines and embrace it and incorporate it into the work that I hope we're going to be doing to improve housing, the housing market in our community. And one thing I would like to ask, though, is since St. Catharines has been doing some of this work, and I know that you've got projects that are actually happening already, have you noticed a difference in homelessness, or are there any figures generated on how this has affected the people most in need?
I don't believe we've done any quantitative measurements as far as that goes. I've seen a much higher interest in developers coming in and saying, oh, you guys are doing something about it, we'd like to be part of it. We've gotten a lot more involved on regional committees and boards as far as affordable housing goes, so we get a say, we get our opinion, we get a lot of the knowledge that's coming from there, a lot more involvement with the province and CMHC as far as it goes, so a lot more exposure. A lot of the municipalities like yourselves have asked us for information sharing. I believe Fort Erie, I believe their council motion that they take our report and sort of build on it, which is great. That's exactly the point.
Thank you very much.
On my left, Councillor Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. I'm intrigued with the container housing and the mini housing. I think we've seen it different times on TV and what can be done with these units. It's pretty amazing. But do you have any is there anything started in St. Catharines on this? Is there,
So
I'm wondering what the planning department does when somebody comes in and says, I want to do something like this. Is there something you can go to? And
as far as container housing, we do have a container housing development it's a home that's already built. It was built on a lot that was, I believe, about 12 feet wide. So it's a lot that couldn't be used for anything else. And they built a single detached home on it with, I believe, 2 or 3 containers stacked on top of each other. We've recently had a couple developments come in for an apartment building made purely out of containers. And it's something that as far as from a planning perspective, we allow container homes and mini housing. We have small lot areas. It's like putting a regular house on any type of property. Your issues really come in more at the building permit stage, how to make sure that you fit those regulations. And our staff have been great about sitting down with those applicants and sort of going through each process and seeing how to make that a little bit more of a simpler way to get through it.
all right, and just a follow up to that. What's the response been from neighbors that are, beside this when somebody says they're going to put a container in? And
I think from the
become a
beginning
house?
they were a little bit hesitant. When one of the first examples came up, they had an open house for the public when it was completed, and we had great feedback. Everyone was very impressed with what was done. It was very well done. I think when you sort of show people exactly how it can look, what you can do with it, the response has been quite good.
Good. That's it.
Any further questions of Margaret? There being none, thank you, Margaret, for being
Thank
here
you.
tonight and giving
Thanks
us
for
this
having me.
presentation. Next item on the agenda is the mayor's report, which will be very brief. Just want to reference Canada Day and the Optimist Day in the Park on July 1st. I want to extend appreciation to all the volunteers who helped the Port Colborne Optimist Club and the fun activities that they put on. The weather cooperated and there were smiles all around, especially when it was cupcake time. A special thank you to Grant and Carrie at Sobeys for their generous contribution of the cake, which was enjoyed by all. Next is the Regional Council's report. Mr. Barrick is not here, and I don't know whether he indicated that he would not be here. In any event, he's not here. Okay, would like to move on to Councilor's items. Item number 1, that's Councilor Kenny. Say that again, Councilor Kenny?
Just our items, things that we want addressed.
This is just inquiries. Inquiries.
Okay. Councilor Kenny, do you have any
I do not.
concerns? Thank you. I'm afraid to ask Councilor Desmarais, but I'll ask Councilor Butters first.
No, we'll let Bart go first.
Let's get the.
Well, I might as well get into trouble before you then. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had sent in a list of questions to staff, but I see Mr. Aquilina is not here, so I'm not sure who's pitching for him. Is Evan or
Evan and or Todd.
Todd will? Okay, that's fine.
Todd mostly.
So I didn't send those questions to you though, so did you get them?
I did get them.
You did?
Scott brought them to me earlier
Okay,
this morning.
great, 'cause
I can't
I-
speak to all of them, but I've got something on some
Okay.
of them.
So I'll just start off at the beginning. The first one I had was, and these are all concerns from our, residents. I don't make up this stuff as I go along. There was concern about the signage at Pleasant Beach regarding the parking, and I'm getting reports from residents that it's inadequate, that tow trucks and even garbage trucks are having trouble accessing where they need to get to in that area. Do you want to do it one at a time, or should I just?
Probably better. We're a little
Okay.
scattered here, so let's
Okay.
do one at a time, if
Yeah.
it's all right with you.
Sure.
So that one there, I'm a little confused about what actually they were talking about. Was it the parking signs, 'cause the no parking signs go all the way up to Missioner?
I
Is
think you
this
were
about?
talking on the
Is this
east
right
side
at
of
the
the
very
road.
bottom?
Yeah, I think at the very bottom of the east side of the road,
Yeah.
that the tow trucks couldn't actually get to the cars that needed to be towed who were parking illegally, and the garbage trucks were having trouble getting to the garbage depot to retrieve the garbage because of
Right.
folks in the way.
It didn't take very long, I think, to realize that we needed to add some no parking signs to the garbage enclosure itself to keep them away. So those signs are actually put up, I think they were put up early last week. There's no parking signs actually on that garbage enclosure now.
Okay.
And I did speak with our bylaw enforcement officers, and they say since those signs went up, they haven't had anybody parking there or in that little area to the north of it, that they need to keep free so that the garbage trucks can get in there
Okay,
and get the stuff
so do
out
you
of
get
there.
any feedback, or does that division get any feedback, say from the tow truck companies saying we're having trouble maneuvering in here on busy weekends, or?
If we do, I'm not aware of it.
Okay, so maybe you could have somebody from that department
We certainly can.
maybe answer that question back.
Okay.
So the other question is we had asked for signage to redirect folks to our other beaches away from Pleasant Beach, and specifically to Centennial Beach and the Cedar Bay area and to Nickel Beach. So I just was wondering if those signs are up, and if so, where are they? And if they're not, when? Because now we're into like July and it's beach weather.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to really check in to see what was happening with those signs. I understand there was an initiative previously to get those signs up.
Right.
And if I had time today, I would have actually gone out there and had a look myself. I am out there quite often. I know that I've seen some signs out in that end, directing them, and never really put two and two together till today why they're out there. It's because council wanted them out there to redirect them back to the other beaches. But I can't say where they actually are, what the style is, or.
Because actually, Councillor Bodner was really directly involved and had suggestions on where these signs where they should be put long before you ever get down to the beach end. So maybe Councillor Bodner could jump in here, Mr. Mayor. Would that be okay?
Mr. Bodman, do you have a comment?
So just to be clear, Todd, they aren't the ones at the beach.
No.
No,
They're
I
the
understand
ones
they're
that
out
would be
kind of away from there.
Hopefully, Shirkston Road, Pleasant Beach and Shirkston Road, directing them down Shirkston Road this way to Centennial or you know, or Nickel Beach. I don't think it'd be too complicated a sign just saying, you know, so many kilometers or minutes to Centennial Beach, free parking, Nickel Beach. Not a lot of words, just, you know, direction. You know, we had talked about that, and if they're not up, they should be up. And that location, I don't know, maybe it isn't, maybe there isn't any place to put signs, but I would be surprised if we couldn't find something or somewhere to put it there. So.
Right. To be clear, I'm not saying that they're there or they're not there. I'm just,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure that they are, but I can speak to Dan on that and get back to you.
Right, yeah, I don't believe
or
they're
Dan
there.
can bring it to the next meeting.
I haven't seen them on that road.
No. Okay.
Mr. Logie has a comment?
Sure. I think through your worship to Councillor Butters, I took a chance to go down there myself today, and actually had a chance to talk to one of the residents on the phone today about some of the concerns around the signage and the parking signs. I didn't know it would be the last one I saw, so I didn't take great note of it, but I think there's one just before Shirkston Road that says Nickel Beach this way, among other things, but it's not any kind of level of detail. It doesn't say all of it, it's an arrow that points west. It doesn't really get a person to Nickel Beach, but I did take the chance to talk to some park staff about, you know, and it won't be fast, but maybe it'll be, if it takes a little while, but it's done well, improving our wayfinding signage to both beaches and getting people there. And I think that's going to be a combination of signs that are at the beach, and I know at that point they're out of their cars and they've got their backpack or their cooler out of the car already, but if they're parked illegally, and there's a good sign with mapping or directions that will incentivize them to get back in their car and go somewhere where there are bathrooms and there are parking spots, that might help. I think we also need signs before they get out of the car that say this way to the beach, and we've talked about improving the wayfinding signs. So that is something that we're actively working on. I can't promise that it'll be done fast. So but at this point, we're trying for
Okay.
effective.
I guess, could you give us like maybe regular updates on it? Because it really
Yep.
is important, as
Sure.
much as we can put no parking stuff and send tow trucks down there and our bylaw staff, and that's all part of it. But if we don't show people where to go,
Right.
then
And
that's like huge, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of maybe, that's a really important piece of this, is to show them where they can go and
Sure.
enjoy a wonderful experience as opposed to getting their car towed or
Yep.
worse, right?
Through your worship, I will work on that, and I will bring back updates
Give
to
us-
council.
Okay,
Yep.
and I think my last one, and Ron is also involved in this one, and it was it was to do with signage regarding dogs on Pleasant Beach. And I just shook my head in confusion or wonderment, I don't know. And I know that Councillor Bodnar did forward his to Chris Lee, and I forward mine to bylaw, so I don't know who wants to jump on that one, but
I can speak to
anybody?
that. I can speak to that one as well. I've seen the sign. It's a sign that's on the Shirkston side of the imaginary property line there. They've got a sign on either side of the post there. One is, if you're on Shirkston Beach, it tells you that you're welcome to use the Shirkston Beach area. And if you have dogs, you're welcome to keep them on a leash and have them here. And then it tells you what the hours are and that they need to have shots and all of the normal. If you have dogs, this is what they need to be, well behaved, etc. And then on the back side, if you're coming from Shirkston towards Pleasant, it has a similar message, except that it also adds on there that, I'll quote it here, pets may be off leash past this point. Use the dog beach area at your own risk, which is an incorrect statement to make on a sign in reference to our beach. There is nowhere other than the off-leash park at the top of Elm Street is the only place you're allowed to have your dogs off-leash in a public area. So that's incorrect.
And we're going to do, what about it?
We'll endeavor to talk to our friends at Shirkston and get them to change that sign.
Well, taking that part off would be a real good step. Because we do not, I mean, they, as far as I'm concerned, unfortunately, they caused a lot of the difficulties at Pleasant Beach with all the excess people and parking back in the day. And then the last thing we need is, dogs running off leash down there. Like, that's just insane. That's just looking for trouble. So thank you for your
Yeah, thank you for
answers,
bringing it.
and
I mean, on
that we
behalf
get an
of
update
bylaw.
on that as well. And I'm hoping that's going to get sorted like PDQ.
It's not my sign to make a promise on, but we'll do what we can to get it changed. It's a weathered looking sign due to be replaced, so we'll get them to change the wording at the same time.
Thank you very much.
Anything further, Councillor Byers? Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have 3 items tonight. It's been a rather busy time since our last council meeting, and my phone has not stopped ringing. At the last council meeting, I related the need for more effective policing due to safety concerns around the roads and the sidewalks and the trails. And from the number of calls that I received in this last couple of weeks, I have no doubt that Port Colborne Council is well followed on YouTube. Because let me tell you, everybody knew everything I had said, and they had so much more to tell me. So I've heard stories upon stories of various issues, and they were all called policing issues, but when I sorted them out, most were, but some weren't. Just to relate one of the concerns, and I'm going to relate this one because I'm sure most of us here have probably either experienced it or heard about it, but and this would be about individuals begging for money at grocery stores and banks and other public places. It might not seem like a really big problem. You know, they're just asking for spare change, and you can just tell them to move along, and that should be over. But it is a big problem. The approach that they're using is somewhat aggressive, and they're not just approaching adults anymore. So now this becomes a huge problem. At least one manager of a grocery store has called the police and been really not satisfied at all with the outcome of that. No change was had at all. So he's really not happy. And the fear factor is ramping up with kids being approached, or young people being approached by people asking for spare change. It's become quite a common thing to do now. And we're only talking about 4 or 5 people that I've noticed in Port Colborne. I haven't seen more faces than that, but one is too many as far as I'm concerned, and something needs to be done to address this. So possibly, Scott, when you're talking to Niagara Regional, you could add that to the list. It really is, it is a problem, and with the number of concerns that I've heard from people's phone calls, I would say that it's time for us as a city to sit down with Niagara Regional Police and start to work very much like we've done with the East Village Task Force, and work on issues one by one, because things are out of control and the level of policing is just not effective, and that's what the problem is. And I know that they're bound by a lot of the rules that have changed and the way that the laws have changed, but there has to be some creative thinking or something done, and the action has to be consistent. That's the other problem. So hopefully I can leave that with you in the mayor's office and see if we can't get something arranged.
Sure, just super quick. Through your worship to Councillor Desmarais, I did, as you know from my emails to you, the day after the council meeting last week, I took the chance to meet face-to-face with the staff sergeant for Port Colborne, and we were able to get some of those concerns, explained to him and communicated to him. One of the things we talked about, he and I, in that face-to-face meeting, was the fact that now that we're coming down to sort of the last half year of the term of council, having the NRP detachment from Port Colborne take a more active role in the orientation of the new council and understanding of the police's roles, how to get them out on calls, what exactly they do for us, what they need from us in order to do an effective job. But maybe there's an opportunity for them to meet with this council before the changeover too. So maybe I can do sort of with the staff sergeant a before the changeover and an after the changeover piece.
I would think that would be really helpful. I know there is a stakeholders meeting for the Niagara Regional Police Service on the 31st of this month that I'm going to be attending, and I have every intention of relating the concerns to them as well, so that it's heard on as many levels as possible. So I think if we all get to it, we could have some change.
There's also an issue of break-ins in the Central Business District, which the police detachment commander has been advised of, and we will be moving forward to have a meeting with affected individuals, the BIA, etc.
That's very good. Okay, so that was that one. My next item It's, again, CBRA, 20 years and counting. I believe it was February of this year that I asked the city, through the mayor's office, to request a meeting with the then Minister of the Environment. At that time, it was suggested that rather than make that request, that Mayor Maloney, CAO Louis, Councillor Doucette, and myself have a meeting with the Valley Management and the Minister of the Environment, representatives from the Minister of the Environment, with the aim to bringing an end to the community-based risk assessment. Well, this meeting did occur, and everyone was present except the representatives for the Ministry of the Environment. Subsequent attempts to schedule a meeting with the ministry there have failed. This is really a problem. For all the parties involved here, life can go on. Business can be conducted without any real impacts from the issues brought about by the contamination, with one exception. And that's the very people who live in the area, in those unresolved CBRA areas. This is like, it's absolutely unconscionable. This just can't keep going. It just cannot keep going. 20 years is ridiculous. And we now have a new Ministry of the Environment. Actually, it's now the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. And the new minister is Rod Phillips. And I'm asking tonight that, as you know, sitting here wrapping up this last, the end of this term of council. So I'm asking tonight that, Mr. Mayor, you would insist upon a meeting with the new Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Park, and we can maybe do something to bring this to an end.
Thank you, Mrs. Emery.
That was number 2. This is number 3. This is one where I have a really hard time containing my anger, and it really is anger at this point. It's more than frustration. The Nickel Street property, where local residents and this councillor are really very upset about this property. For more than 8 years, the city's been asked to force some improvements to a building that all residents agree should have been torn down. This property has bylaw and property standards orders on it. Those orders were issued. The owners at that time chose to appeal the orders. That was heard. That appeal was heard by our committee, our Property Standards Committee. The orders were upheld, and actually there was something else added to that order. The appeals process stopped at that point. It did not go out any farther, so it didn't go farther up the chains, which meant now it's a permanent situation. But here we fast forward a couple of months, and still the building continues to deteriorate. No action's taking place. And I keep asking and asking, what's going on, what's going on? I'm not getting any answers, of course. You know, there's a privacy factor and all of this. I'm not getting any answers, not getting answers. So very recently, I was informed that someone on staff chose to put these orders aside or in some way make them no longer important, that things could be just left be. So here, this property stands with a peeling roof, and we're talking about peeling tin. This is like a tin roof. It's peeling off and fragmenting. Good wind is going to have that thing flying off at somebody, and you know, this could literally decapitate someone. And I'm not exaggerating at all. This is ridiculous that this continues to go on. And I've expressed my personal feelings to Scott about this. But I got to tell you tonight, and this is, the community is asking me to let everyone here know that the level of anger and frustration and utter non-confidence in this administration is just at an all-time high. The people are just so fed up with voicing their concerns to either their councillor or just somebody at City Hall, and then just, you know, it's like we're going la 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 and forgetting about it. And we know we're not doing that, but that's the appearance out there. And when you've got something like this, it's just so unbelievable. You know, a property that has a fire more than 8 years ago, the building has been vacant for at least that long, it's deteriorating daily, it's just become a home for wayward animals and drug users. Not so many drug users in there, I don't even think it's safe to be standing in there anymore. So this is absolutely ridiculous, and I've got to tell you, I will agree with residents on this thing. If this was sitting on this side of the bridge, this wouldn't be allowed. It has to stop. This has to come down. Do something about this building. I don't care what it's going to take, and I really don't even want to hear what it's going to take. I just want it done. So I'm asking that staff take control of this, get it done, please. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Demery. Todd, do you have a comment on Mr. Demery's concerns?
Not at this time. I would suggest we take it up with Dan, perhaps when he's back next council meeting. We'll give him a heads up on that.
We'll be sure to do that. Mr. Osh, you're not in position to comment as well. Okay. On the CBRA issue, Mrs. Demeray, we have yet another meeting scheduled with INCO to go over this, but I have no notice that the ministry will be present.
Well, and I would suggest that there's no point in having a meeting without the ministry, because they're the only ones who hold the key to this.
Mr. CEO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Demeray, on the INCO matter, the valet CBRA matter, the mayor and I had a subsequent meeting to the one that the ward councillors were invited to, probably middle of June. At that time, it was decided that the very next meeting would be Regional Public Health, Ministry of the Environment, the mayor, myself, Director Aquilina, and both ward councillors. That meeting was scheduled for July 24th, and on June 27th, the Ministry of the Environment declined the invitation to the meeting. So perhaps the next step would be for the mayor to reach out to the minister, not the ministry, and actually have a discussion with the minister about how this process can be advanced forward. Because valet, and I can't make their argument for them. They say that they're ready to proceed and they have a package prepared for ministry approval. The ministry, the claim was that it was due to vacations and other summer scheduling and they can't meet until September, but that's another, quarter of a year that added to the 20 years. So I will follow up with the mayor and the mayor's admin tomorrow about getting in touch with the Ministry of the Environment, Minister of the Environment. On the third issue, which was the Nickel Street property, as you and I know, as you and I have discussed in the past, one of the factors that delayed or waylaid that process was a potential sale of the property. And when that sale fell through, I'll go back to work tomorrow and talk to some staff, and of course, Director Aquilina is on vacation for another week, but I'll talk to staff about how we can rewrite that process and get it back on track because of that sale falling through.
Okay. Might I say that I don't think there is a single person in the community, nor myself, that cares a whit about a sale happening or not happening on that property. The building needs to come down. It is that simple. If we keep waiting for a sale to happen, because the building has been for sale for 12 years, right, and it continually changes hands. This rewrites every time. That's just not acceptable. The only people who pay this price are the people who live there. I mean, how much more do you need them to carry? That's the whole point.
Thank you, Mr. Demeray. Any other questions, Mr. Danish?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think I'm going to direct my questions to Chris this afternoon. The tracks on the field in there, we had some work done on them, paving done and whatnot there. I think they deserve a silver star for the work they've done. That hasn't looked that good for a long time. I hope we can get something done on Clally about the same way, because they did a great job. I was over for a little walk there. It looks good. Second note, the region grass cutting. When would the second one be coming up? I've got a couple residents around Westport Gardens there, and if you go along Highway 3 across from the old Port Pontiac there, she's kind of long. I just wondered when we might see something there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dance. We'll make an inquiry with the region and see what the timing is on that. At this point, we don't know for certain.
Yeah, I'd called Regional Councillor Barrick, but he never did get back to me. And then my third note was one I brought up about a month ago, getting a left-hand signal painted on Elm Street there. I've been cut off twice myself. They totally missed it when they did the lines back in 1st of June or whatever. You'll be going south on Elm Street in front of the Esso station. It's supposed to be straight through there and a left-hand turning lane. They never did put that back up there, so I did ask that about a month ago, if we could look into that, please, and get a region guy over there with a paintbrush and get something on the road.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dance. We definitely will reiterate that one more time with the region and see if we can get some action.
That's all I got.
Thank you. Mr. Binder, we're good?
I think Councillor Butters covered most of what I was going to say, but I wouldn't mind picking up on what Angie said about that derelict building. That sounds like, it doesn't sound like, it is totally unacceptable. It just, I don't care where it is in the city. And I know we're very cautious about doing something that may get us in trouble, but in some situations, I'm not so adverse into going and doing something and then let them do something to us, you know? Like, it just sounds totally crazy that it takes that long. So if it's a wayward bulldozer or whatever happens, make it happen. Thanks.
Mr. Bodnar. There be no other questions of members of council. Are there inquiries or responses to inquiries? Chief Cartwright.
Your Worship, thank you. I've got 2 or 3 things, some of them pretty quick. Just to let council know, we're continuing on with the smoke alarm program. We're up to 39% compliance, which is better than what we were in the past year or 2, so we are moving in the right direction. That's a good news topic. I just want to, for those that are watching tonight or listening tonight, if you have an open burning complaint, please call 911. Leaving phone messages on my phone or my fire prevention officer, my deputy chief's phone on a Saturday night for us to pick it up on a Monday is too late. Call 911 and we'll come and deal with it immediately, please. Going along with open burning, I polled the 12 municipalities today. 7 of us are contemplating, because of the dry weather, extended period of dry weather, looking at burning prohibition. That could take effect later this week depending on forecast. There's an awful problem with forest fires in northern Ontario, down as far as Huntsville and various other areas south of that, and we're quite concerned. West Lincoln implemented no burn as of today, so a lot of us are looking at it if things don't get better. I'd just like to say a couple words, if I could, with regards to the issue I brought to the fore last council meeting, that being that of hoarding. I will say that I got a response with regards to the issue. It was put on the OIFC website the very next day as it was reported in the paper, and it went province-wide. I've received a number of phone calls of support. We've had an offer of assistance out of Durham Region. We are coordinating a meeting for later this month with some key stakeholders in this, with the hope that we can come up with a plan that includes the region. We have had some conversations with regional representatives. We are of the understanding at this time that the region's representative are meeting with the LIN in August with regards to looking for financial assistance. That's our understanding of it at this time. And so hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be able to address this in a more meaningful way than what's been taken in the past. I will say that I did take the time the next day to go in and research one particular property in the city. And in this particular property, the fire department, that's the fire trucks, have been there 32 times in 33 months. On top of that, the deputy, myself, and our Fire Prevention Bureau has been on the property a number of other times trying to assist the individual that lives there. We have been unable to get any assistance from anybody. And that's what brings the frustration to a boiling point for us. We know that if something drastic happens there, we're going to lose a life, and we don't want to see that happen. It's not a figment of my imagination or that of my fire prevention officer or that of my deputy chief. You as council really have no idea how many hours are put in by staff trying to help people in this type of situation. And we're trying to get this corrected as best we can in our community, but I will also tell you that in dealing with the fire prevention officers across the region, it is a region-wide problem. More so in some communities than others, but certainly we fully intend to continue to push forward with the hope that somehow in some way we're going to have a mechanism with which we can help some of these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief Cartwright? You may recall when you made your intervention at the last council meeting, Chief, I asked for specifics of the concerns that you have so that we could take it up with the correct regional departments. Would that be forthcoming?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm in the process of putting together a slide presentation to make it that more meaningful to you, and that presentation will be given to you to provide to the region. Although most of the issues that we have, the region is aware of. It's what I'm saying in the past is that their hands are tied too because of funding. And I made that point clear that I'm not blaming the region, I'm not blaming us, I'm not blaming the province, I'm not blaming the federal government. We all got to get together to make a difference here. That was my point that I tried to make at the last meeting. Some people may have taken exception to that. It was not intentional on my part. I'm trying to do what's right for the community. And certainly I can provide you with addresses, but the reality of the situation is there's people that work in positions that already have that knowledge. And I'm hoping that by putting together a meaningful group in the not too distant future, we can forge ahead with a honest effort that makes a difference within our community and throughout the region. That's my intent.
Thanks for your intervention. Are there any other responses to inquiries from members of staff to previous councillor inquiries? Councillor Rodner, you have something more to add?
Can I just ask the chief, did I hear you right when you said that some of the reason that the region isn't helping is because of funding?
Your worship, as I understand it, and I don't have a real good feel for this, but just from the information that's been provided to me, and perhaps the mayor may have a better feel for the situation, but my understanding is that the LIND is the one that provides funding for mental health issues, which this falls within. My understanding is there's been a lack of funding or a significant cut in funding, which in fact has made the issue become far worse in recent years, shall I say. My understanding is the region, their representatives are taking another shot at trying to get that funding restored. Now, you may recall with the recent provincial election, there was a promise of funding, I think, of $300 million or something the province had indicated they were going to put into mental health. The hope is that some of that funding will find its way down to the region of Niagara.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. At this time, if there are no further inquiries, we will move on to those items requiring separate discussion. And the first one is item number 1, Councillor Kenny. You pulled that one?
Yes,
Move
Mr.
the
Mayor.
recommendation.
Planning and Development Department, Planning Division's Report 2018-95, subject stopping up and closing parts of Empire and Michael Roads and sale to Sun Communities Operating Limited Partnership.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Demeray. Discussion. Councillor Kenny and then Councillor Demeray and Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of questions. I see Mr. Vincent's here this evening. He's our special projects manager for this. And I see a lot of things listed here that in respect to the agreement for, and I just want to know how we're going to get a guarantee. It's on page 32 of your report, and it's regards to Shirkston residents, LOS 1RO, residents access is restricted. But I want to know how we are going to have, make sure that these residents have access to Shirkston, because it's gone back and forth, I think a couple of times. One time they did, and then they didn't. And now I want to make sure, how do we guarantee if we go into this agreement that these residents will have access to Shirkston and not be charged a rate to enter?
Mr. Vincent, do you wish to respond to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Kenny, the agreement will be registered on title, and it will be binding on Shirkston forever. It's a legal matter. Once it's registered on title, it cannot be removed.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one more question. It's on page 33. It says SSI property will deliver a covenant in favor of the city, which will survive closing not to allow legal access from Jew Michael Road and in from residential or other properties that are within. And how do we do that? How do we assure that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Kenny. Once again, the covenant is a legally binding agreement on some communities and cannot be transferred to somebody else. The other thing which, in fact, I had been having some discussions, potentially it was post this agreement being completed, If the council wants to add additional insurance, I don't think is needed. They could in fact close up a small portion of the current open Michael Road, similar you have with a highway system in Ontario, and the city retain ownership of that. Then you could put up a small fence if you wanted to. So you could physically restrict any access using Michael Road. Legally, this is binding sufficiently. My lawyers, the city lawyer, says this is quite sufficient, but there are some things that perhaps if council wants to consider post the agreement, because you still own the open Michael Road allowance.
Yes, we do.
That you can do. So it's not something that has to be done tonight at all. It's something to consider, and if you feel that it's still, generally if council feels they want to proceed in that way, that's an option. The other option would be to perhaps consider the landowners of Michael Road on both sides as a single individual. It's agricultural property, so some of that could be closed up, or all of that could be closed up, and that obviously, if it's not an open road, how does anybody get anywhere? It's done. Sure. But again, that's not a part of this agreement. No. It's certainly something that council wishes. I can certainly continue discussions with the gentleman that owns the land on both sides. And it's a common practice in agricultural areas where if you have a road allowance that dead ends, goes nowhere, then councils have agreed to close it up and sell it to the landowners because it's really his land being used by people going back and forth.
Correct. Thank you. Then I guess, Mr. Mayor, through you to the CAO, I see also that it has on here that I want to make sure, first of all, what Mr. Vincent says happens. So if Mr. Vincent can have more discussion to make sure that that is indeed going to happen, however that discussion and legal matter works, I think it's important that, I guess I need to be assured, like, I get this kind of funny feeling when I talk about the sense of doom or boom, I guess. So.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, it's completely within council's control to make that decision at post tonight's meeting. You can,
well, I'm going to make
CAO
that
can instruct as well.
I want that to happen.
I don't want to complicate this report by putting something additional in there that may have an impact on it. So certainly if you want to make a motion after the report's dealt with, or if the mayor wants to entertain that kind of approach.
Okay, thank you.
Or if CAO Louis wants to tell me to something different.
That's what I just...
Well, no, I guess that's for your worship to Councillor Kenny. I was just going to, I think, say the same thing, and maybe that's just redundant, but both of these clauses which you've identified would be registered on title to the property, so they would survive. That would be no different than, a good example that maybe Port Colborne people understand is when you live across the road from the lake, but you have deeded access from the lake. The person who builds on that property can never block you from that deeded access. It's on title to the property in question, and it survives future owners. So if Shirkston Shores was to be operated by some other company in the future, this isn't a deal the city has with that company. This is a deal that is permanently on the property and the successor owners of the property. So this will survive, for example, a sale of Shirkston Shores to a different trailer park operator. And I think that's why the city feels comfortable that we have protection built in, that these two clauses will remain in force in perpetuity.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's it, Mrs. Kenny?
Thank you. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Butters.
Thank you. I think this thing is a long time coming. When I think of all the beating your head against a brick wall sometimes to get an agreement like this over so many years and to finally see something on paper is really a good thing. And I think it's going to be, I really believe that it's a good thing to finally settle the road allowance issues once and for all. We all know there were encumbrances on Empire Road. We all know that, people can get ticked off and cranky about it till the cows come home, but it didn't change the reality of it. This finally puts it into a perspective where we've finished with it. We're going to get a nice chunk of change, like over $500,000 is not chicken feed, and we're going to solidify LOS 1RO residents that access, because let's face it, the people of Shirkston, the families that live out on Empire Road and Shirkston Road and those surrounding roads put up with a tremendous amount of nonsense living near a park. And that's just the reality of it. And the traffic and noise and garbage and the list goes on. And it was always, just in terms of historical perspective, back in the day, it was Shirkston's way of giving back to that community for kind of the disturbances and the annoyances that they had to put up with through the summer season. So to have this solidified and on title, so that they don't have to worry about going to the gate and one person saying, "Oh no, you're not allowed in here." No, I am allowed in here, and they'll have a process, and they'll be able to walk in and access that legally and without worrying about it. And so I really appreciate the work Mr. Vincent's done on this file. And as far as the issues surrounding the Michael Road allowance that were raised at public meeting, those have been managed to be put to bed, protecting the residents on Michael Road. And you know, there's not a whole bunch of people who live on Michael Road, but those ones that do, this really matters. So this is so important that that we've gotten this agreement now, and we can now move forward and put some money in the city coffers for future, I don't know, whatever gets decided to do. It'll be put in a reserve, and maybe a future council will find a really good way to put that to the city's good use for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Through your worship, Councillor Butters, I don't think there's a question there, but and I don't think I think that was the point. I do think that all of the questions that were brought forward at the public meeting have been answered by Mr. Vincent's report. There is protection in there for the city and for the residents. I do have a few emails, as do you, about questioning what is the rush. And I can assure the public and council that there is no rush. I'm glad this is happening on my watch. I can't take any credit for it, but it predates my time at the city. It predates my predecessor's time at the city. This is a long-standing issue that has finally been resolved. And you're right that taking the proceeds of sale is taking land that is not benefiting any city residents and benefiting all city residents by putting it into recreation projects, as is the recommendation in the report.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No further discussion? Are we ready for the vote? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item number 2, Madam Butters.
Okay, Planning and Development Department. Sorry. Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report 2018-98, subject proposed site plan agreement for Pharmatica Corporation 3786 Highway 3 East.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Kenny. Discussion. Mrs. Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, well, maybe Evan, are you on deck? I was given some very specific questions and concerns, and that they want to make sure that these are addressed in the site plan agreement with the City of Port Colborne. So if I just read them off to you, can you tell me that they're in the agreement, and if they aren't, can they be put in the agreement? So can I just sort of, now I've read it, and some of them I think are, but there's a couple I'm not sure. So the first one is concern lighting of area. Because of requirements for security and surveillance, that light should be directed and pointed inward towards their building so as not to shine in the neighbor's bedroom, living room, or loss of enjoyment sitting in their yard. Is that covered off in the site plan agreement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters, yes, it's item number 4. I can read the clause if you wish. The owner agrees that all site lighting shall be directed in a manner such that the angle of illumination does not extend onto adjacent lands or public streets.
And if it did, and if it by some chance did bother some neighbor, that neighbor, who would they call?
They would contact the Planning and Development Department and either planning staff or by law enforcement or a combination thereof would visit the site, do an investigation.
Okay.
Anytime that a site is out of compliance with the site plan agreement, there's opportunities for staff to enforce the agreement.
Okay, thank you. The next one is a concern of security cameras / surveillance be situated and directed so as not to impact the neighbors. Is this part of the site plan? I actually didn't see it in there, but that doesn't mean I couldn't have missed it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters, I don't believe that's actually an item that the city is allowed to regulate through site plan control. I do believe that there are other laws pertaining to how security cameras can be directed, and I don't know if it's a criminal code offense or if it's a civil offense, but there certainly is, I believe there to be other protections available to residents.
Okay, so could we just kind of make sure that we have that information available for residents if they need it, and who they would contact if that's, could we do that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and the next one is, when fencing is put up, that mesh covering is used to eliminate or reduce bright lights from vehicles going in and out of the business so as not to impact neighbors.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters, we have a requirement for screening. The applicants chose to use, I cannot recall the species of tree, but it is an evergreen tree trees that will be planted along the sight line, the property lines. The city does accept this as a suitable replacement for board-on-board fencing. It is considered privacy screening.
Okay, are they required to be like a certain size and height? Because, I can go get like little evergreen, baby sticks that I call them, and put them in the ground, or I can get like.
Yeah, no, true enough. They upon being planted, they have to be of a size that will provide some screening, with the expectation that upon further growth, they will continue to provide screening. They're not going to choke each other out, to say. So if you go to, for those who are able to, if you go to Schedule B, there's black items, splotches, dabs around the perimeter of the property, and those indicate the approximate location of the trees that will be planted, and they're indicated as proposed spruce or cedar trees to screen fencing on the site plan. Schedule B in the.
Yeah, it's too bad they couldn't do the mesh thing, because.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And plant as well, because it takes a while for trees to grow, as I well know, because I plant trees every year. And it's too bad the mesh screening is like an immediate solution, right? And even to do a portion of it would.
Yeah, I think we should.
To me, I think they should do that, and then and plant the trees as well, because planting trees is always a good thing. Mm-hmm. Never mind screening, but is there a possibility that can be?
Absolutely, that is something we can discuss with the applicants.
Okay, and even if we were to pass this, then we can kind of leave that. Can we leave that door open, or does this need to be referred back to you?
No, if you pass it, we can leave that door open. We can make that amendment to the site plan agreement.
Okay,
and,
then I would like to see that happen.
That they are friendly to it. If they are not friendly to it, then it would come back.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, and my last one is a notice to be posted close to the road and visible for drivers to read on the proper government agency that deals with odors and complaints, and listing phone numbers to contact. So it would basically be a sign that would direct people that if they have a problem with this operation, who they should call. Because I'm going to tell you, we all know there are other growers in Port Colborne, and nobody wants to touch it with a 10-foot barge pole to correct it. I realize that this is a very different operation, and their rules are very different, and they actually have rules, which is refreshing. But I think it's important that people know who they need to call if there is a problem. So is that part of this? And if it isn't, could that be added, please?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters, I certainly do appreciate the nature of that comment. The difficulty is that Highway 3 is under the jurisdiction of the MTO. The MTO regulates all all signs that appear within, I want to say, 400 meters along either side of their corridor. I cannot guarantee that the MTO would be amenable to any sign.
What about posting a sign on their building? Because a person could pull into that parking lot and be able to see because the building is a nice sized building, right? And then there's building on the east and the west side of that property. So maybe if they could post a sign on their buildings saying who to call if there's odor complaints.
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butters, it's not just any sign that is legible from the Kings Highway is under regulation of the MTO. So it may be difficult to enforce, but that certainly is I really do appreciate the intent of what you're suggesting. This may be something that the city can mail a notice out to property owners within a defined boundary, that's making them aware of the numbers to call, either Health Canada, Ministry of the Environment, and even City of Port Colborne, the different things that we will respond to, or that each agency will respond to at the site.
Or could we leave the door open on that too, to see what we could or couldn't do, and then come up with some kind of a plan to address that issue?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So if we were to pass this tonight, those two items, the door's still open for the wiggle room to fix them, right?
Yes.
All
but
right.
I guess I just want to make sure that if the MTO does come back and say that no, we're not going to allow a sign like that to be posted, that is not going to run counter then to the council's
Well, they
intent.
have signs on their property that advertise Magnum Crane.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that they.
We will investigate it.
If there's got to be a way, even if you put it on the side that doesn't face the highway, if somebody pulls in, they can, there's the sign, right? I'm just saying there's got to be a way to let people know what they can do if they need to. That's all.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We will investigate that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That's it, Mrs. Butters? Mrs. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Evan. Evan, just to further what Councillor Butters was saying about that sign, whether that's successful or not, we should at the very least have something posted on our website detailing reporting processes and who you report what to, because seriously it will all fall on a councillor, and that councillor is going to have to go through that process anyway, and still we know that we are not the people that you report to. So if you could do that, that would be a good thing.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demeray, it's certainly good information for staff to have on hand as well, not just for this site, but any of the other sites that generate such complaints, because we are often left scrambling, looking for someone.
That's it, Councillor Demeray.
That's it.
Any questions on my left? Councillor Gwadner?
Just a statement. Evan, correct me if I'm wrong, but on number 37, the applicants are putting up $23,000 with the city to correct any maintained landscaping as indicated in Schedule B, and also the parking areas and different things. So there is some money there to dip into if trees are part of that landscaping, and say they die after the first year or whatever, there's an expectation, I would imagine, that these trees are going to grow and, you know, be maintained rather than simply planted once and forgotten about. So can you assure us that that actually is the fact?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, the deposits are, security deposits are collected for that explicit reason that if any of the agreed site works are not implemented, or if they're not implemented to the standards set by the city, that includes everything from grading of the property being improper to trees not being of suitable size or not living past the first year, then certainly the city will use the monies deposited with us to go in and correct those matters. So I forget the amount. You said 23,000 and change, and that I believe that is 22,602. Okay, so yeah, that is that's the amount that we will be required to collect, and that's in keeping with the revised security deposits required that council passed in, I want to say, April, reducing the burden somewhat.
Okay, Mr. Bodnar?
Yes, sir.
Everything's good. Recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed? Are you opposed, Mr. Dench? One opposed. Matter carried. Item number 6. Councilor Demery, you
Thank
call
you,
that one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community and Economic Development Department Events Division, report number 2018-101, subject Canal Days, Bass Pro Range.
Seconder for the recommendation. Councilor Kenny. Consideration. Comments. Madam Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm always very supportive of the efforts staff takes to make Canal Days bigger and better every year and add some variety. This time I'm a little bit conflicted on this choice. I'm really glad with the idea of putting in this shooting range. I'm glad to see that there's a safety education component, and that's always a good thing. But I've had a few calls, and I can't say that I disagree with the residents who called me. And respecting their wishes, I did tell them that I would bring this up tonight at council. They very much object to the city of Port Colborne supporting the encouragement of using guns. So I just want to make sure that we're very clear. We've made the statement. I'm not entirely on board with this either. So I just don't think it's a wonderful thing to do. I don't think it's a needed addition to Canal Days either. So I just want to make that statement. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Button.
Thank you. I think I had the initial first blush at this was, we're going to have a shooting range? You know, like, it just, with everything going on in the world, it seems to be a little against it. But when you dig deeper into it, it is BB guns. It's not 22s or something, you know, but a gun is a gun, right? You know, but, you know, not everybody's against the use of that. Kids have BB guns now. Maybe they'll learn some safety tips through this. I don't know. The optics aren't maybe the best, but I think I've come to accept that it's not a bad thing. You know, I think I had a BB gun when I was young. I got both eyes, and you know, you
didn't see that show. You'll shoot your eyes out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there is a show about that. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. It's.
Thank you, Mr. Bond.
I think it's okay.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Louie, I have a question.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Demery, I know you didn't ask a question per se, but I did tell, I worked with Gina on the writing of the report. I told Nicole she didn't need to come today because I didn't know if, I figured I could handle it on my own. If there are any questions, I'm prepared to answer them. I do know in my discussions with Gina, who wrote the report, that this has been at other festivals in Niagara and Niagara Falls in particular. They use and you didn't ask, but I'll tell you anyways, they use a giant inflatable range that's completely sealed off. It's almost like a bouncy castle, if you can imagine it, that is, I guess, bulletproof on the inside and hopefully the outside. They're BBs, they're not even pellets, right? There is an emphasis on training and gun safety, and of course Bass Pro, who has in the past set up the fishing pond, is in the business of selling outdoor hunting and fishing products. So it is something that they approached the city about, and we knew that we would need relief, and we knew there'd be divided opinions. So I guess with tongue firmly in cheek, apologizing to you guys that we threw the decision on you as the elected officials, whether or not to grant the exemption. But there is an emphasis on training and safety that the staff from Bass Pro who come out do. And you know, the Conservation Club locally does try to do events too with their skeet shooting and I guess turkey hunts. Nobody hunts pheasant anymore, I don't think, but the different birds that they hunt and whatnot. And so if there are questions, I can take them, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any specific safety or educational elements that you are aware of? Do you know what these are?
So through your worship, I guess to your worship, I can't say specifically what they are, but I do know that the staff that are at Bass Pro or from Bass Pro are trained to give like a safety talk to it's designed for kids, and I guess, I don't know if adults can do it, I assume adults can do it too. They're designed to give instructional and safety information to the users about gun safety generally, but also specifically using the target. Like how to be safe while they're doing the activity, but also how to be safe in their lives beyond just the one activity.
We have a question from Mrs. Butters, Mrs. Demery, and Mrs. Kay.
Well, maybe not so much as a question, but a comment. I've always considered myself more of a gatherer than a hunter. But having said that, I also did learn to shoot a rifle when I was a young kid and on the farm, and that was a very normal thing to learn, and used to go skeet shooting with a friend of mine who belonged to the gun club and borrowed her 20 gauge, and we used to go, and it was a safe environment to learn something. But as far as actually hunting, no. You know, but I understand that other people do enjoy it, and it's not an illegal activity either. So, I mean, I think it's important for that safety aspect to be front and center, and maybe that is the positive out of all of this, is that somebody out there is going to learn something.
Mrs. Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like I say, from what I've read about the safety talk, it's not very in depth. That I would assume that a mother sending a child out with his first BB gun would do a little bit more work than what's going to be done here. But in any case, and I think it comes really down to people being upset by the fact that it's the city endorsing this rather than, you know, it's just the optics are not good, and I like guns or I don't like guns. It comes down to that as well. So I'm sure that it will be done well. I'm certain that, you know, the city doesn't do things to set up a problem, and I understand that. So that's all fine and good. But I would like to hear the fire chief's comments on this and see how the fire department feels about this.
Are you in position to respond?
Your Worship, I'm familiar with the report, but quite obviously it doesn't fall into my jurisdiction whatsoever in any way.
I accept that. Mrs. Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondered where they plan to set this up.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Kenny, it is going to be at the south end of West Street near the former water tower property, as the other booths, or I guess, or activities that are there is going to be a new police headquarters because of the concerts moving. It won't be at the back of City Hall. It will be there, as well as they'll have a compound at the concerts, a security stand, and the other thing that they're going to have there is, I wrote it, radio club, amateur radio club. So,
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Butter?
And I guess it's close to the hospital too, so it's kind of. Just to the CAO, if he could pass on to Gina in case of emergencies, I have 4 different kinds of vinyl patches in my inflatable section at the store, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bodnar. Are there any other questions on this issue? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? 1 opposed?
I was talking, I wasn't paying attention.
All those in favor? 1, 2. 3 in favor, opposed? 2. Motion's carried. Next, item number 9, Councillor Butters. That's your item?
Yes, sir. Region of Niagara regarding petition holding elected officials to a higher standard. And it says that the correspondence received from the Region of Niagara regarding the petition holding elected officials to a higher standard be received for information.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Mr. Bodnar? You second that, Mr. Bodnar? Absolutely. Discussion? Mrs. Butters?
Well, the way I understood this is that the region passed a resolution that this petition be circulated to the local areas, members of parliament, members of provincial parliament, local area municipalities, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for comment and response. So I don't really think that we need to file this. I think that we should be looking at a response and that we should give it consideration. There are some legal, maybe some legal aspects to this in terms of what this petition talks about. It talks about amending the criminal code and hate crime provision to establish an offense where an elected official that uses their office to promote or advocate racism or discrimination to an identified person or group are guilty of promoting hatred. I think any time that we can step forward and stand together against that kind of racism and hatred is the thing that we should be doing. So I don't want to file and receive it. I don't want to receive and file it. I would like this council to respond to it. And I understand that maybe some people might need a bit of time to think on it, but I definitely don't want to receive and file it.
Further comments? Mrs. Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with what Councillor Butters has said so far. I believe that this is something that we should be receiving and supporting and moving it along as far along as we can.
Mr. Bodnar?
I wonder if we could get, I think it's a good thing to go down the road and see where we get to. I wondered if staff could comment on it too, maybe at the next meeting or something. If there's something, I think Councillor Butters touched on that, there might be something in there that needs to be reworked or something. So I wonder if Councillor Butters would be happy with that.
Mr. Bonner, are you then making a motion to refer this to staff?
Well, I just was going to follow up on what Councillor Butters said. I'll let her do the referring or whatever, but thought I'd throw that in.
Can we refer this to the clerk's office?
If we make a motion and
I
second it,
would be
then
happy to
vote
make
on
a
it.
motion.
Is there a
Refer this
second
to the
for that
clerk's
motion?
office.
All those in favor? Opposed, it's
Thank you
carried.
very much.
Mr. CEO, you have that. Oh, is it the clerk's office?
Clerk's office. I'll help.
I think we'll all help on this one. Okay, item number 11. Madam Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Memorandum for Gina, Event Coordinator, Canal Days 2018, Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 56. Request for letter of non-objection regarding a temporary license extension.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Demery. Discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Opposed, it's carried. those would appear to be all the items for consideration. Are there any notices of motion this evening? There being none, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Kenny, second by Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This meeting is adjourned. And we'll then quickly move on to the next meeting. Which would be our regular meeting of Council 17-18, held today, Monday, July 9th, following the Committee of the Whole meeting. I call this meeting to order. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
No, there are no addendum items this evening.
I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Dance, second by Councillor Bodnar, to confirm the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Yes, Mr. Bodnar.
Item 1, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next item, adoption of, oh, yes.
Item number 11, please.
They're so quiet down there.
I know,
Mrs.
I'm
Sutter.
surprised.
Item 11, thank you. And then call for the adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of council 15-18 held on June 25th, 2018. We have a motion for that. Councillor Kenny, second by Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? Opposed? That was in favor? Carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Kenny for the...
Mr. Mayor, just for the complex.
Thank you.
I'll pull
Seconder?
those. 1 and 11.
Anyone else? Back to item 11, perhaps?
1 and 11.
1 and 11, I'm sorry.
Yeah, those are the two
Okay,
conflicts.
seconder also for 1 and 11? Okay. Okay. It's not requiring separate discussion? Yeah, approval of those items not requiring separate discussion? Councilor Rodner? Seconded by Councilor Demeray. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any proclamations, Madam Clerk?
No, there are no proclamations this evening.
Are there any minutes of board, commission, and committee?
No, there are no minutes this evening.
Consideration of bylaws. We're voting back on item 1. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 11. All those in favor of item recommendation 11? 1, 2, 3, 4, carried. Because there's no opposition.
No, she's the truth.
I'm the conflict.
She's a conflict. She's a conflict.
We have 2 bylaws on board.
Yes, there are 2 bylaws this evening. 6598-53-18 being a bylaw to stop up and close a portion of the Empire Road and Michael Road allowances being Part 1 on Plan 59-16-102 and Part 1 on Plan 59R-16-103, and to declare the lands as surplus and to sell the lands to Sun Communities Operating Limited Partnership, as well as 6599-54-18 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its meeting and regular meetings of July 9th, 2018.
Deal with those in bulk. All those in favor? Opposed? You're in favor. Carried. At this point, I entertain a motion to go into closed session. That council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Minutes of the closed session portion of the following council meeting June 11th, 2018. Planning and Development. Planning Division Report 2018-78 concerning the potential sale of city-owned land pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239(2)C, a proposed and pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Number C, Planning and Development Department Planning Division Board Report 2018-99 concerning an appeal under the Planning Act to the local planning appeal tribunal related to 650 Barrack Road pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239(2)E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Are there any disclosures of interest in the closed session agenda?
We need a motion to go into the other room.
Do we have a motion to adjourn to the ante-room? Moved by Councilor Bodnar, seconded by Councilor Danch. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.